Hey, what's good, everyone? It's Jordan Pickleball back at it again with another pickleball paddle review for you. Last time we did a review of the Bread and Butter Loco, and I think that was one of my favorite paddles I've reviewed as of late, but we have another one of their offering that's been out for a while, and so I'm really going to be asking the question, where does this paddle stick up today and in the paddle market that we see around us? And that is one of my favorite looking paddles on the market, the Bread and Butter Filth. Just so you guys know, I was sent both the Filth and the Loco for review units from Doug at Bread and Butter Pickleball. So first off, thank you, Doug, for sending me these paddles. If any other companies want to send me paddles, I will be willing to review them. But I do have the caveat that I'm going to be telling you the truth, the whole truth, so help me God. So this will be an honest review of this paddle. And really, we're asking the question, where does it stand 6 months later from its release? It is an elongated paddle. It has a very striking logo and a very good look to it, but there's a lot of elongated paddles on the market, let's be honest. There's a lot that the Filth is competing with, and so, while it is beautiful, how does it really stand out from the crowd? So over this review, I'm going to be giving you my initial thoughts. I will be going over some of my feelings on the paddle, and then I'll wrap it up and tell you just what I think. The first thing I want to commend Bread and Butter, and I mentioned this in my last video, but I really like their packaging. I think it makes it so fun. I mentioned at the end of the Loco review, I thought it would be a great gift for a lot of people, and I say the same about the Filth as well. I think that opening one of these up for Christmas or a birthday or a special occasion, an anniversary, if you're one of those weird pickleball couples, who knows? I think it'd be a great gift, and I think that both the look of the paddle and the look of the packaging makes it a fun time. I don't think a lot of companies really focus in on making the packaging a good time, so the fact that Bread and Butter goes above and beyond in this is something that really stood out to me. As far as paddles that this competes with, this I know is marketed as a power paddle, so I think some obvious choices there are the one we have up here, the Pursuit MX, as well as the Gearbox coming out recently. And I know that a lot of people, even though I haven't hit it, say this feels similar to a Carbon 1X in a lot of regard. So I'm just going to talk about my thoughts on the paddle, compare it to maybe a couple paddles that I've used, but mainly I'm going to just tell you the honest truth about what I liked and what I had a little difficulty with. So for dimensions, we're going to compare it to a couple thinner paddles just so you can kind of get an idea of how thin it is. We're going to be comparing it to the MX 14mm as well as the Engage Pursuit Pro. So it is quite a bit thicker than these two paddles, as you can see there, being at 16mm for the thickness of the Bread and Butter, but otherwise the dimensions are somewhat similar. We can line these up here and you can see that we have a little more face area on the Bread and Butter, as well as what might be a little more handle room. It's hard to tell, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But it does look like the MX has a little bit lower on there. It's a different story when compared to the Pro Power Elongated by Gearbox, because this one has a lot of room on the bottom here, but also loses a lot of handle room. Ultimately, this comes down to preference, but I really do like the dimensions that Bread and Butter went with for the Filth. It is a good paddle for two-handed backhand. It looks good when you're striking it really hard from the line, and it's very, very lightweight, which is a difference between these other two paddles that I'm going to go into a little bit more in a minute here. Sorry, it's iPhone Jordan mentioning one thing I forgot, and that is the paddle name is so cool. Being called the Filth, are you kidding me? I think that's one thing I kind of forgot, but it's so cool when people would ask me, what paddle are you using? That looks really cool, just to be like, I'm using the Filth. It just, I don't know, it's just something to keep in mind. So outside of looks, we're going to be going into some of the more familiar categories of comparing paddles, and we're going to start with power. Now, the power on this paddle is hard to judge, and I think especially looking at it today rather than when it first released, it makes it even more difficult with some of these insanely high power paddles, such as the Gearbox, that also have question marks of their long-term legality, to be honest. But if I was to compare it to a paddle such as the Gearbox or a similar paddle that has just insane power, that being a 10, I would say this comes in at around an 8. The power is very, very good still. I have no real complaints about the power, but it does feel a little bit less than some of those crazy powerful SSD core paddles and similar technologies. One thing that I do think was a little bit of shock to me was how comfortable the power feels, especially from the back line. It's a very plush feeling paddle, and you're able to generate a lot of power pretty easily, and it feels really good. So yeah, I'd again give this power about an 8, maybe an 8.5 altogether. Solid power overall. I think the hardest thing for me personally was the next category, that being pop. The pop of this paddle is not bad by any means, but when I was transferring from the Loco and the Gearbox, two very poppy paddles, it was significantly less than either of those. This can be a good thing, this can be a bad thing. It really depends on if you like playing with really poppy paddles at the line. I do like playing with them, and so I was struggling just a little bit to remember that I needed to add a little extra to my flicks, add a little bit more to my resets, and remember that sometimes it took just a little extra effort to get it across the line. Overall, I'd probably put the pop at a 6.5 to a 7. Again, not a bad thing at all. It's just something that you have to keep in mind when you're playing with this paddle. I think it's pretty typical for power paddles to have less pop, at least in some of the ones I've used, but for me, I just love a poppy paddle. I love being able to respond right away, so this was something that took a little bit of getting used to. For spin, I felt very similar with this paddle as I did with the Loco. You're going to be able to generate great spin with this paddle. You're going to be able to shape your shot. You're going to be able to get that ball in the corner where no one can reach it. You're going to hear probably some cursing from your opponent as they aren't able to get quite to the ball. But it's going to be a good time playing with this paddle. I didn't have any real problems with spin. I felt that it was really, really good, and I'd probably rank it somewhere around an 8.5 to a 9. It was a top-tier spin paddle. I put it probably in line with the Vatic Pros and maybe just a little bit below the Double Black Diamond, similar to what I said about the Loco. Now, when it comes to feel of the paddle, this is one I struggled a little bit with just because it's so different than some of the paddles I have been using lately. I want to say that it is a power paddle first, but it definitely can be used as an all-court paddle, and I say that because the weight on this paddle is very light for an elongated shape. I feel that I wasn't really slowed down at the line like I am with some of my other elongated paddles, and I felt like I was able to keep up in most hands battles. However, I do feel that the power is very good, but the pop is a little bit lacking. So as you advance to the line, you're gonna probably want to continue that similar motion in a lot of the shots, whereas with other paddles, you start to subdue that motion quite a bit as you get towards the line. I felt like the sweet spot was pretty good. I did add lead to add a little bit of stability just with some of these off-centered shots. And I think that's something I typically do with a lot of paddles, but I was surprised at how much it really did improve that sweet spot, just adding that little bit of lead to it. All right, here's the real question of the day is, who is this paddle made for? And I do have some good thoughts about this. The first one, again, is that I feel like this is a great paddle for anyone wanting to get into the sport, wanting to get a good looking paddle, wanting to be able to compete at a high level in pickleball, but still feel like they have some personality. That's the first group that this is for. I feel that Bread and Butter does such a great job with the design of their paddles, and I don't feel like a lot of companies are getting close quite yet. And so as long as they own that trophy, I'm going to continue to recommend their paddles for anyone who has the want to get into the sport, but also wants to have a little bit of personality and a little bit of flair to their game. And again, I think this paddle is great for people who do baseline shots, for people who swing through the ball quite a bit, and people who don't want to have to adjust too much of their gameplay when they get closer to the line. Now, this does not necessarily mean this is my favorite paddle on the market because I take very small shots. I adjust a lot, and so it took me a little bit of getting used to. But that being said, I don't think there's anything wrong with the paddle itself. I think it's one of the best blends of power, spin, and pop that we can get from an elongated paddle shape, and I don't think there's a whole lot in the price point that it offers. This comes in at $165 or a lot cheaper if you use the code JORDANIRWIN at checkout. Shameless plug, thank you. But this really does set itself apart from a lot of the paddles in that price point. I think the Vatic Pro is one that is similar in the V7 model going down, but I do think I prefer this to that just because of the static weight being so much lower. If you do choose to purchase, that helps the channel out a lot, as well as if you choose to comment or subscribe with your thoughts on the paddle. I think the Filth is one of the best looking paddles on the market, but that doesn't mean that this does not perform well. This is a really, really well-rounded paddle. It offers a lot of power, a lot of spin, a lot of pop, some good control, some good sweet spot, and some good looks all at the same time. I think that this paddle maybe is in a little bit of a different market and a different place than when it first released 6 months ago, but I don't think in any way that means that this paddle isn't right for you. I would definitely recommend this for people who love swinging through the ball, love a lot of power, and love still having that control and hand speed. So if you want to go ahead and check this paddle out, feel free to use my code, but if not, there's a lot of other good codes from a lot of other good creators out there. So that's all I got to say. I like this paddle a lot. Thank you again to Doug from Bread and Butter for hooking me up with both this and the Loco, and we'll see you in the next one. God bless.